Hello there, future teacher. Welcome. In this video, we are going to talk about our second lesson for PED 3, which is the learner-centered teaching approaches. For this lesson, we are going to tackle the three popular instructional approaches. And the first one is the cooperative learning approach. The second one is the differentiated instruction approach. And the third one is the personalized learning approach. Let us go first with the 5 key changes based on our previous discussion regarding the introduction to learner-centered teaching. So we have mentioned there the 5 key changes in the learner-centered classroom or the 21st century education. We have compared the traditional setup of classroom and the learner-centered classroom. So we have talked about the 5 key changes. The first one is the balance of power, followed by the function of content, the role of the teacher, the responsibility for learning, as well as the assessment and evaluation. And so let's start with comparing the different teaching approaches. So when we talk about the balance of power, how it is different when we talk about the traditional instructional approach, the cooperative learning approach, the differentiated instructional approach, and the personalized learning approach. So again, when we talk about the balance of power, in the traditional instructional approach, the teachers there are very dominant. Okay, very dominant. They just tell the students what they have to do. Of course, the learners will only have now a minor role. They are very passive in their classrooms. So against the traditional instructional approach, the teachers are very dominant and the minor roles are given to the learners. And for the cooperative learning approach, when we talk about the balance of power, of course, the teachers there are still dominant. However, what makes it different to traditional instructional approach is that in cooperative learning approach, the students now have an empowerment. So they are now empowered because they are being grouped together with their classmates, with their peers. Next, when we talk about the differentiated instructional approach, in the balance of power, more choices are given to students based on their ability levels and interests. So now we are grouping the students according to their ability and interest. When we talk about making decisions on what should they do in that group, so the teachers here in differentiated instructional approach considers the ability and interests of learners. So for example, the teacher will group the students into 3. The group that needs improvement, the group 1, and the group 2, which belongs to those average group or average level. And then the group 3 is for those who are in the advanced level. So, of course, the teacher will now consider the different abilities of the learners based on their groupings. And then, lastly, for the personalized learning approach, the power lies into the student. So, mostly reliant on student motivation, engagement, and interest. So, there is one learning principle that we can connect to this one. It says there that learning is activated by the learner himself. Okay, once the student will now have the motivation to learn, so the teacher can give activities to the specific student. However, if the students are not motivated yet to learn, so of course the teacher cannot do anything about it. Because again, learning is activated by the learner himself. In personalized learning approach, the power is very reliant to the student's motivation, engagement, and interest to learn. Now let's talk about the function of content. How is the lessons being given to the students different from the traditional instructional approach to cooperative, differentiated, and personalized learning approach? When we talk about function of content in the traditional instructional approach, of course, when we talk about traditional, we follow what is being indicated in the curriculum, structured curriculum. And when we talk about the pacing, dapat fixed. We have to consider when is the specified time When is the recommended time by the DepEd to start the school year? Okay, so when DepEd says, okay, let's start our classes by June 5, so you will really have to follow that. And then when we talk about timeline for learning, so the competencies or the lessons for that specific subject should be finished within that first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. There should be no adjustments being done. Dapat fixed talaga. And when we say cooperative learning approach, how is it different to traditional instructional approach when we talk about function of content? It is the same. Same content. What is being provided by the curriculum should be followed in the cooperative learning approach. But how is it different to the traditional approach? What makes it different is that the students are being divided into groups. Same content, but processed by students in groups. And when we talk about timeline, still fixed timeline of learning. Now let's talk about the differentiated instructional approach. In differentiated instructional approach, the content being given to the students are varied. It will depend on their level, on their ability. Let's say for example, in your group 1, which is the group that needs more improvement, needs more guidance. So you will give them the activity that is suited for their level, not the activity that are too difficult. Activities that are too difficult, you should not give that to them. And when we talk about the average level students, so of course you have to give them activities that are suited to their level. And for the advanced students, you have to give them not too easy activities, because the tendency is that the learners in the advanced level or advanced group, they will find it boring. They will not have the motivation to learn because it is either too easy or too difficult for their levels. I hope you get that point. And for the personalized learning approach, very flexible curriculum. Why? Because the learners will design their own learning plans. They will suggest to the teachers what they want to learn in that specific subject. So that is the difference between the traditional, cooperative, differentiated, and personalized learning approach when we talk about function of content. Next, let's talk about the role of the teacher. Of course, in the traditional, the teacher here is very authoritarian. They are considered as the only expert of knowledge. Okay? And then they manages the classroom, of course. And then for the cooperative learning approach, the teacher will now become a facilitator. They will facilitate, especially when they are going to group the students. Okay? And then for the differentiated instructional approach, the teacher here is the designer of the different learning tasks. So different learning tasks for group 1, different learning tasks for group 2, different learning tasks for group 3. Again and again, the teacher should consider the levels of the students, the ability levels of the students when designing activities. And lastly, for the personalized learning approach, the teacher here is the collaborator and co-creator of knowledge. So they are just collaborator. Why collaborator? Because in the responsibility for learning, in the personalized learning approach, the students themselves design their individualized learning plans. So the teacher, the role of the teacher is just to approve. It's just to approve the suggested topics or lessons by the learners. After the teacher have assessed whether it is good enough. If not, then the teacher will suggest to the students na maybe we can add this lesson, or maybe we can remove this topic because this is irrelevant already. So something like that. And let's go back to the responsibility for learning for the traditional instructional approach. Of course, as we have mentioned earlier, that the students in the traditional setup, they are very passive. Why? Because the teacher is the expert, the knowledge expert, very authoritarian. The students here are just mere receivers of information given by the teachers. And next, for the cooperative learning approach, the learners are now co-creator of learning because they collaborate with their peers, with their classmates, with their group mates. They now do some brainstorming. They express their own ideas. And that is the same with the differentiated instructional approach because they also have groups here. Okay, they still co-create their learning with their group mates. And again, as what we have mentioned earlier, in personalized learning approach, the students will have great responsibility in terms of their learning because they have to design their own learning plan. And since they have designed their own learning plan, it is expected that they will work hard to achieve mastery of the learning outcomes, of the targeted learning outcomes. So hopefully that is clear for all of us. We have discussed the difference between the traditional instructional approach, cooperative, differentiated, and personalized learning approach when it comes to the balance of power, function of content, the role of the teacher, and the responsibility of the learners for their own learning. Okay, now let us focus on the cooperative learning approach. Let's talk about its definition and other concepts related to it. So, cooperative learning approach, or CLA, started becoming popular in the 1990s in an attempt to move away from traditional pedagogical approach. Meaning to say, cooperative learning approach is the very first step of change in our educational system from the traditional pedagogical approach. And CLA used the social interdependence theory, which proposes that the behavioral outcomes of a person are affected by their own and others' actions. Meaning to say, the learners needs to have others accompanying them in learning for their learning, for them to achieve better learning. Again, cooperative learning approach used the social interdependence theory, and this social interdependence theory proposes that the behavioral outcomes of a person are affected by their own and others' actions. Meaning to say, a learner, according to interdependence theory, learns better if there is someone beside him. We have here the 5 factors for effective cooperative learning approach: the positive interdependence, individual and group accountability, interpersonal skills, promotive interaction, and group processing. So when we talk about positive interdependence, let me just transfer my face. So when we talk about positive interdependence, students commit to personal success as well as the success of every member of the group. If there is someone from the group who is having a difficulty, the group mates who have understood the lesson very well will try to help that member of the group. What is their goal? It's for them to succeed all together. They are interdependent of each other. Next, let's talk about individual and group accountability. I believe you can relate to this one because this highlights the importance of each member of the group being accountable. When the leaders of the group assigned a task individually to the members, each member should perform the task accordingly so that they can achieve their overall goal. Next, let's talk about interpersonal skill. Of course, our learners in this cooperative learning approach. Okay, our learners here are grouped together. They are going to mingle to communicate with their other classmates or peers. And of course, we can expect that through cooperative learning approach, we can develop their communication skills, their interpersonal skills. Group members will now be able to develop their teamwork skills. They may discover students who have this leadership potentials. And we can develop here the decision-making skills of our students. Aside from building friendship, they will also be able to develop their abilities in solving conflicts within the groups. Now let's talk about promotive interaction. Promotive interaction has this almost have the same idea with positive interdependence, wherein the group members will help each other. But in promotive interaction, what is being emphasized here is they promote their own success by sharing sources of information. Classmates will help the student by providing him or her the link, the internet link. So, promotive interaction. And next is the group processing. So, usually, this part of the cooperative learning approach is like forgotten. Okay? Because after the group activities, the teachers will just let the students report their group's output, and then after that one, the teacher will give feedback, so on and so forth. But there is no time for group processing. What should our students do in the group processing? So the students should reflect and discuss with their group mates. The teacher should allow the students to process as a group. The teacher should ask questions to the learners, to the groups. The teacher will ask these questions specifically. What went well with your group? What are the things that you think have helped you in achieving your goal? Okay, what techniques did you utilize as a group that contributed to your success? Or the teacher could also ask, what went wrong? Ano kaya yung mga dapat niyong gawin? The group members should be allowed to reflect as a group. Okay, so that's it for the 5 factors for an effective cooperative learning approach: the positive interdependence, individual and group accountability, interpersonal skills, promotive interaction, and group processing. Now let's talk about the differentiated instructional approach, or DIA. So teachers in DIA use time flexibly, apply a range of instructional strategies, and becoming partners with their students. And teachers usually differentiate their teaching by modifying 3 aspects in his or her classroom practice. So, what are those 3 aspects that the teacher will focus on? Saan dapat mag-iiba si teacher when it comes to giving differentiated instructional approach? So we have here differentiating 3 aspects of pedagogy. Of course, the teacher, after grouping the students according to their own interest, to their own ability, the teacher will now consider giving varied activities based on the content, based on the process, based on the product. So, as for the content, of course, we cannot give the same lesson, the same level of lesson to those group of students who are under needs improvement, to the average and to the advanced students. We should vary the content that we should give to them in differentiated instructional approach. And when we talk about the process, of course, we must give them varied learning activities. Okay? And as for the product, we are also expecting for them to provide different projects, different requirements. Okay, again, let's try to differentiate instruction when it comes to the content, what to teach our students, the process, how to teach our students, and the product, how we assess the learning of our students. So when grouping them, we need to vary the content, the lesson that we have to provide according to their level, not too difficult, not too easy according to their level. And we should be providing varied learning activities depending on the groups. And we should also expect from them to provide different proofs of learning, different requirements, different projects. Okay, so content, process, and product. We differ in these three aspects when we talk about differentiated instructional approach. And lastly, for the personalized learning approach, of course, we have to consider the flexibility, the pace of learning of our students because they have designed, right? They have designed their own learning plan. That is why they can give an input as to how long are they going to learn a specific lesson. But then again, us teachers are collaborators, right? We have to evaluate whether the amount of time they have allotted to learn a specific lesson is just enough. Maybe we can evaluate, maybe we can evaluate if the the allotted time for a specific lesson is very long. So we can reduce that. We can suggest to the student to reduce that. Or after evaluating, we have come up with the realization that this time is just too quick for learning this lesson because this lesson is a broad one. So we have to allocate more time for learning this lesson. So the pace of learning of the students should be considered. And the learning objectives, instructional approaches, and instructional content may all vary based on learner needs. We have to cater their interests, their needs when we talk about personalized learning approach. In other words, personalized learning approach is very individualized. Very individualized. Because again, learners have individual differences. And so, let's talk about the design elements of personalized learning approach. We have here the competency-based graduation requirements, personalized learning plans, student ownership and agency, and flexible learning pathways. When we talk about flexible learning pathways, the learning activities must be meaningful and relevant to the learners, driven by their interests and often are self-initiated. And we also have to consider their socio-economic capability. We should not give activities or projects that our students cannot afford. We should consider their needs as that includes their financial needs. Okay? And then next is the personalized learning plan. Since they have crafted, or the learning plans are co-crafted by the students with their parents as well as their teachers. So of course we can already assess what are their needs, what are their abilities, what are their interests. So we have to design activities based on what they have told you, what are their interests and needs. And then for the competency-based graduation requirements, we should always consider here that our target is for them to gain mastery of the competencies, of the lessons. Okay? So we have to provide them real-time feedback. Kasi feedback will really allow our students to improve their learning. And then lastly is the student ownership and agency. If the students have completed the tasks that they have included in their learning plans, of course, they will become very proud of themselves. They will take ownership of their own learning. They will be able to monitor, they will be able to reflect on their personal progress. And one way to assess that is by allowing the students to create portfolios, okay? Portfolios. And those are the popular instructional approaches: the cooperative learning approach, differentiated instruction approach, personalized learning approach. For cooperative learning approach, we have 5 factors. We have the positive interdependence, individual and group accountability, interpersonal skills, promotive interaction, and group processing. While for the differentiated instructional approach, we have to make sure that we make a difference when it comes to the content, the process, and the product of our teaching. And lastly, for the personalized learning approach, we have to make sure that these design elements should be met the competency-based graduation requirements, personalized learning plans, flexible learning pathways, and student ownership and agency. Here are the sample teaching strategies according to approach. So, of course, from the traditional, we have to adhere to the lecture, the recitation, student report, role play game, so on and so forth. And for the cooperative learning approach, we have the think, pair, share, jigsaw, team game tournament, student team, so on and so forth. For the differentiated instruction approach, the tiered lessons, choice boards, graphic organizers, and then for the personalized learning approach, the group blogs, personal vlogs, discussion threads, chat groups, polling, project, e-portfolio, just like what I told you earlier. And that's it. If you have questions so far, you are very much free to message me and our group chat for some more clarifications and concerns regarding this topic. So thank you so much, teacher, for listening, and I hope you have learned something from this video. See you on the next video for another lesson. Bye.